So good evening, everyone. I'm Maria Aaron. I'm the secretary for the annual meeting. And this evening we're hosting the second of two faculty development webinars. The first one was about 2 weeks ago, and we talked about how to make your message stick so that the learner can retain the information and apply it. And this evening we're going to talk a little bit about how to engage the learner. So what we're hoping to avoid is that scene where we've all seen it in those big lecture halls where people start to pull out their cell phones or their laptops, or they start to doze off, and we certainly don't want to see any of that at the annual meeting this year. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. We will record both of these webinars, and they'll be placed on the Academy website, so feel free to share this link with anyone that might be interested. And just as a next step, put on your calendars to join us in Chicago on Friday, October 26th at 3 o'clock. Jeff will be speaking on the ABCs of learning, advanced learning, the brain, and the competitive edge. He's basically going to talk about 6 brain-based principles that encourage learning. And it is always a pleasure to introduce Jeff Hurt. Jeff joined Velvet Chainsaw Consulting in 2010 and currently serves as the Executive Vice President of Education and Engagement. He received the Professional Convention Management Association's Educator of the Year Award in 2012, and he is really just the master of meetings and adult education. So we are thrilled to have you with us again tonight. The title of his presentation this evening is From Passive Listener to Active Participant, Increasing Audience Engagement. Jeff?
Thank you, Dr. Aaron. I appreciate it very much. From Passive Listener to Active Participant, Increasing Audience Engagement. You're going to learn some stuff about me real quickly here, just my first few slides. I'd like to know, where in the world are you? Would you use that chat box over on the left-hand side? Down there in the bottom where you see the long white bar, would you type in what city you're in, where you are, and tell us what your weather's like. What city are you in? What's your weather's like? Richmond, Boston, good to see you both. Give everybody a few seconds here. I know there's a slight delay. Chicago, 80 and beautiful. Largo, Florida, Miami Beach. Hi, Preston. I'm in Dallas, too. It is gray in 70s. We've had gray for quite a while now. Columbus, Salt Lake, good to see everybody. Denver, several of you in Denver. Durham, Kingston, Ontario, nice to have you. Thanks, everybody. Keep typing in. Mexico City. All right. Good to see you. Another Dallas. Hi, Eileen. San Francisco, Nashville. Keep those coming in. So I want to thank you right off in advance for your participation tonight. I also want to thank you in advance for your mental engagement. You had a choice this evening that you could be doing. Hi from Egypt, by the way. And you've chosen to spend your time with us. And we greatly appreciate that. We know that many of you are seasoned presenters. You've done this for a while. And what you're going to learn today is just going to help you become even better at this presentation. So I want to make a presenter-attendee agreement with you. I hope you'll make the same agreement with me. And this presenter-attendee agreement, I believe in the law of the mouth, the law of the click. If any time this presentation goes in a direction that doesn't meet your needs, you get a text, you get a phone call, you get bored, it's just not working for you, you have the right to click on out of this. You don't have to tell us anything. You just take care of that. And we're going to ask you to put those mobile devices around you on vibrate. Some of you have 2 and 3 devices open up. Some of us have several open up, ready to go, just in case anything happens. Social sharing is welcome. I'm going to allow you to type, text, social share anything that I share during the presentation. Please don't share anything else anybody else shares unless they give you permission. And let's follow the golden rule for Twitter. Tweet unto others as you would have them tweet unto you. If anybody else is out there tweeting any of this presentation, and also tweet something good before you tweet anything bad from the presentation. Let's make understanding our goal. Understanding our goal, how to move audiences into active engagement, and why that's critical for their learning. And I want to declare this as a safe space to agree, disagree, ponder, and question. This is a place to push back, to ask those questions. It's okay to disagree. So I'm also going to give you a free pass. And if any time I ask you to do something and you don't want to do it, just know you can use that free pass. So there's my presenter-attendee agreement. If you haven't figured out yet, I love Star Wars. I really like stormtroopers. If you were a Facebook friend of mine, you would see that every month I change my Facebook cover photo to something with Star Troopers. So this kind of kind of a little background on me. I've come from a Duck Dynasty-like family. I'm born in the West Virginia hills in a small coal mining town that no longer exists. I'm an animal lover. It was really funny. As a child, I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I was afraid of dogs. Not afraid of dogs anymore, but it was just kind of odd. Presentation Explorer, I'm an education evangelist. Here's some of the organizations I've worked for over the years. You may know one of these, one or two of these, you may not. That's the Don't Mess with Texas campaign, not the Don't Mess with Texans. I now work for Velvet Chainsaw Consulting. And it's your turn. I'd like to know a little bit more about you. It's your turn to type in. If you could travel anywhere in the world, somewhere you haven't been before, where would you go? If you could travel anywhere in the world, somewhere you haven't been before, where would you go? Where would you go? Tahiti, Thailand, Antarctica. Interesting. Italy, Stockholm, south of France, Patagonia, Greece, Australia, Galapagos, Tokyo, Japan. Interesting. Paris, Italy, Cambodia, Tonga. If I mispronounce a word here, please forgive me. I'll ask for grace. Hawaii, New Zealand. Very interesting. Keep those coming in. So here's where some of this information is coming from. I always like to give you some books that you can think about. We talked about the one book, Make It Stick, last time. I highly recommend it. It's an easy read, but it'll mess with your mind. It'll really play with what your beliefs are, what you thought was true, and what is really true based on science. Evidence-based training methods. If you do a lot of presentations, a lot of trainings, I highly recommend this book by Dr. Ruth Colvin Clark. It really gets into the details, even right down to what works with video and what doesn't work with video when it comes to the brain. And The Art of Changing the Brain is a fascinating book. Here's some more favorites of mine. One of my all-time favorites is the yellow book on the far right, Make Your Brain Smarter by Dr. Sandra Von Chapman. She's out of the University of Texas at Dallas at the Center for Brain Health and the Brain Performance Institute. I also really enjoy the other two, but What Makes Your Brain Happy and Why You Should Do the Opposite. What makes your brain happy and why you should do the opposite. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to compare and contrast pedagogy, andragogy, expert-centered, and participant-centered education. Pedagogy, andragogy, expert-centered, participant-centered education. We're going to define engagement and why it's necessary for learning to occur. And we're going to identify the steps to transition your traditional lecture to an interactive peer-to-peer presentation. And as Melanie has said, there is a recommended reading list on the website. There's a link there in your chat box in case you want to see some of the other books that we've recommended to you. So these are my 3 learner outcomes. I call them LOs for short. By the end of this presentation, I hope you're able to do one of these on your own. Take a look at the 3 of them. Which one of these 3 interests you the most and why? Would you type it in on the left-hand side? Which one of the 3 interests you the most and why? Type in 1, 2, or 3. Which one of the 3 interests you the most and why? Type in 1, 2, or 3. Several 3s. Lots of 3s. We want the tactics. 1, mostly 3s. 1, okay. Lots of 3s, tired of the traditional. Thank you, Isabella. Some 1s. Okay, don't understand it. Okay, perfect. So here's a principle right off the bat. It's not in this list. We have to understand the why before we know the what and the how. When it comes to learning, if we don't understand the why, if we don't understand the principles first, and we just go immediately to the tactics, we end up not completely embracing the tactics and we copy somebody. Oftentimes we fail in our implementation of it, or we copy them and we divert back to whatever our beliefs are and don't do it again. And we say things like, well, it didn't work. Well, I'm not sure it worked. Or, well, I tried it and the audience didn't seem to like it. So it's critical that we understand the why, what engagement is, and why we should do this before we ever transition into how to do it. So why would this presentation be important to you? What's the magic carrot? What's in it for you? Well, we want to move from being speakers and dispensers of information, just delivery of content, to facilitators of learning and memory enhancers. Dr. Sandra Von Chapman would tell you that we don't have a problem with memory. We have a challenge with attention and focus. That our memory loss is not really memory loss. It is a challenge that we were not strategically focused on the right things at the right time. And that's a real shift in thinking. So here's my question for you. What do you hope to achieve with your presentation? Whatever presentation you have coming up next or for AAO, what do you hope to achieve with your presentation? Would you type in some responses for me? What do you hope to achieve with your presentation? What's your goal? What do you hope to achieve with your presentation? So give you a couple seconds to do that. 100% recollection from the learners forever. Okay, Evan. They do different afterwards. Okay. Heartfelt action. Jim, that's nice. Have the audience leaving thinking. Great talk. Okay. 3 take-homes that stick. Preston, got it. Stimulate ideas. All right. Change their thinking. Okay. People remember the content. Just remember it and learn from it. Improve quality of care. Raymond, really going for the heart of it. Cite the audience to learn more. Leave them with questions as well as answers. Have them feel a response in more than one sense. Okay, I get that. Synthetic response. Improve attendees' financial analysis skills. Great, Ann. Take-home message that is applicable to clinical practice. Love these. Takeaway for audience. Not hearing crickets when I ask a question. You know, when you do hear the crickets when you ask a question, just remember this. The audience is going to be more uncomfortable with that silence than you are as the presenter, so leverage it. Let that silence linger and just stand there and look at them and smile and then say something along the lines, you know what? The silence is more uncomfortable to you than it is to me, so I'll wait. And let them wait. Somebody will eventually go, all right, I'll answer the question, and raise their hand, and they'll answer for you. And that breaks that ice and gets them moving forward. So who is the presentation for? Here's my next question for you. Who is the presentation for? Would you type in some responses? Who is the presentation for? Who is the presentation for? I'd like to know what your thoughts are. Who is the presentation for? Kind of curious. Who do you think? Who is the presentation for? Surgeons, learning new techniques. Okay, thank you. Some of you are holding back on some of these now. Scientific community. Okay, practice administrators, practice managers, fellows, audience. Anyone who could benefit. Okay. Residents, whoever shows up. Practice admin. Okay. People who are interested in the subject matter, the attendee, and their practice. I like that you guys are getting this one. The presentation is for the audience. It is for them. It is not for you, the speaker, the moderator, the panelist, the presenter. I like to call the audience the learner because they're there to learn something. Your job is to be a tuning fork. Your job is to adjust the frequency of your presentation to your audience. Your job is not to ask the audience to adjust to you. Your job is to adjust. And your job is to fine-tune your message to your audience so they get it. And so they get it, I say that my presentations are effective when the audience walks out and says, you made me think. Because if there's no thinking, there is no learning. Learning requires thinking, and you cannot listen and think at the same time. It's one or the other. So when you fine-tune your message, attendees will leave the room and say, well, that session resonated with me. There was something in there. Some of them may walk away and go, I'm not so sure about it, but there's just something there. I'm going to have to think about this for a while. That's the perfect place because they're going to continue to think about it. They're going to continue to wrestle with it. What we actually say in the education world is if you're not wrestling with the content, if you're not wrestling with what the presenter is saying, you're not learning because learning requires some type of challenge. And if there is no challenge, there is no learning. So many of us use, I call it the used car salesman approach to learning. It's all about us. Why we're great, why we're the best. Customers love us. Let's talk more about us. It's all about us, us, us. By the way, if you notice, I'm reading my slides to you because from the education field, we need to read the words that we're going to put up on our slides because if not, we have a dual system going on in receiving information, our sight and our hearing. And if it's not connected into one and makes sense, the brain gets disconnected. So it's best to read the words on the slide. Otherwise, they're trying to read them and listen to you. You either expound upon the slide before you read the words or expound afterwards. It's smarter to do it afterwards because they're going to read those words and not listen. So regardless of what other people say, don't read the slides. From a learning perspective, read the slides or pause and have them read it. So back to the slide. About us, we're great. Why we're the best. Customers love us. Let's talk more about us. You are not the hero in this presentation. Yes, it is boring for the speaker to read the slide word for word, but it's not about being boring. It's about helping them learn. And I make sure audiences understand that, because if you don't do it, you're disconnecting the learning and the brain can't get it. So you're not the hero in this when it comes to the presentations. You are not the hero, the speaker. Here's what many of us do. Many of us have slides that look like this. Now, I've been to plenty of medical conferences, and I've counted slides with up to 400 words in it. I'm like, what are you doing? Do you actually expect the audience to read that? And why is that even there? So the audience is the hero. And if we make them the center of attention, is it better to not have words or to read words? Evan, I would say it's whatever your comfort level is. I put words up there because I want to focus in on them. And I also do the presentation for people who are there then. Oftentimes we take presentations and we give them away later. And people are looking for the words and they go, I don't get it. Or they look at the pictures and go, I don't get it. And it's like, that's right. It was for the audience at that time. If you're going to use words, use fewer words. The fewer words you can, the better. Actually, if you can do an image without the words, it's the best for the brain. So back to this. The audience is the hero here. And to think about this, put them at the center of attention. If you make the audience your hero, place them at the center of attention and make it all about them and their learning and what they can do. And remember this, your success is dependent on them, not the other way around. You need them. Without them, you don't have a presentation. You're speaking to an empty room. So remember this, your success is dependent upon them. And your role is that of a mentor. Your audience will do the heavy lifting to help you reach your objectives. Your audience wants you to succeed. They are there silently, passionately, hoping you will do a great job. And so take advantage of that and just be yourself, be comfortable in your skin, and when you make a mistake, apologize or say, I'm asking for grace. And because the more nervous you get, the more nervous the audience gets, and the more they feel bad for you. So you just want to be comfortable as possible. And your audience will actually help you reach those learner outcomes if you let them help you. So here's my question for you. Why is the majority of association education, and we could actually put in there medical education, both face-to-face, F2F is face-to-face and online, didactic and expert-centered? Here's a question for you. Why is the majority of association education or medical education, both face-to-face and online, didactic and expert-centered? Why is that? What do you think? Type in some responses for me. Why do you think the majority of medical education is didactic? Didactic means talked to. Talked from a SME. We call them a SME, subject matter expert. It's easier? Yep. Historical? Absolutely. Oh, those are correct. Traditional? Yep. Anybody else? Here we go. To attempt to cram in as much information as possible. Jim, bingo. Absolutely. Because we believe the more information we cover, the better off the audience learns it, which is just the opposite. People assume the biggest experts can teach the best. Some of the best experts shouldn't be teaching. They should be focused on their expertise and let somebody else help them moderate a session. We're training people to be experts as well. There are lots of details to learn. Okay, thank you. So I see some more people typing in. I'll give them a couple more seconds. See what some of the rest of you have to say here. University profs and docs don't go through an education degree program like high school, elementary school teachers. Krista, ding, 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 ding. It is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to professors because they don't spend time in the education world learning how people learn. Now, I will tell you that shift is changing because there are universities that are requiring people to be, before they can become a professor, while they may be an expert in their technical field or their specialty field, they're not an expert in learning, and they're beginning to require that these people take classes on how to present and how to learn so that they're better at their profession as professors. Well, it's the way we were taught in school. Take a look at this. I'll be honest with you, as if I wouldn't be, but when I first got out of college, I spent the first 10 years of my life teaching full-day kindergarten. All-day kindergarten. I also worked at Chuck E. Cheese in the evening, and I taught dropout high school students. And I taught all summer long because I needed to make money, and I also wrote curriculum. So I did a lot of things. I can remember kindergarten, we didn't have seats like this. We did much more center-based or experience-based or discovery-based or group-based learning. And it's so interesting because so many of my students, one of the things that happened when I was teaching is the district came to me and asked me to teach K through 3. So they would start with me in kindergarten and stay with me for 4 years. Every student I had was on a different curriculum. They were on their own personalized course, so to speak. So it was just very interesting because after they left my room, they went into a room like this, and they had a really hard time because this was all about producing a product. We were teaching students as if they were a product on a manufacturing belt for the Industrial Revolution, and we just did certain things, and everybody produced the same results to pass the test. Education model was built upon the Industrial Revolution model. It absolutely 100% was. And even go back further, 16th, 17th century Puritan beliefs that knowledge and wisdom was evil. The less knowledge and wisdom you had, the better off you were. Adults were to direct, limit, and control a child's learning. This is where we get some of those thoughts and beliefs that, children don't know, then we could keep them innocent. Well, all of you that have kids, how'd this work out for you? Not telling them something, not helping them learn about something, keeping them innocent from it. We know the challenges with that. So the root of pedagogy is the art and science of how to teach children. Peda is children, the art and science of how to teach children. Now, many of us picked up some things on pedagogy, and there's some great teachers out there that even in elementary, junior high, and high school, middle school, even in colleges have done pedagogy correct. And there's some things to pick up from pedagogy that's correct that we should grab onto. The challenge is it is about teaching. It's not about learning. It's about teaching. And so pedagogy is focused on the expert-centric model. Only the expert knows. Well, I'm here to tell you there is a huge backlash against the expert right now. I was at a conference just a couple of weeks ago where they came out with some research showing the rejection of expertise and even the rejection of medical profession. How the medical profession now, society trusted the medical profession less than they have in 40-some years. So telling does not lead to learning. Now, if you have a spouse or kids, you already know this. Telling does not lead to learning. How many times do you tell your kids to do something and they don't learn to do it on their own? You have to tell them all the time. Presenters talk, audiences listen. This is what we have built this whole model around. And it doesn't lead to learning. If experts decide what content the audience needs to know, the SMEs, the professors, the presenters at the conference, the experts first, the audience is second. What I do know from the learning field that the more you can help an audience learn something that's based on their needs, what's keeping them up at night, or help them aspire, what's going to help them get ahead, the better off you are and the more likely they're going to pay attention. That just means pay attention. It doesn't mean they're engaged. Andragogy is the art and science of helping adults learn. Andragogy is the art and science of helping adults learn. This is what I did my master's work in, was andragogy. Now, I will tell you the blend of some pedagogy and the andragogy together is the perfect mix for today's world. But we really haven't studied the art of learning, the art and science of learning. And if you want to succeed in the future, this is a skill set we have to know. You have to know. Your patients have to know. Everybody needs to know how to learn because we're always going to have to upskill. Andragogy focuses on the learner first, their needs, and then how to help that adult learn that content. It's learner-centric education. It focuses on the learner before the presenter. So what is learning? Type in some responses for me. What do you think learning is? What do you think learning is? Type in some responses for me. What do you think learning is? Okay, so understanding, okay. Ability to retrieve information, Natalie, nice. Getting new information and applying it, Evan, thank you. Change of belief and thought, thank you, Sharif. A pursuit of info, being able to apply what you've been taught, retaining and applying, Bloom's taxonomy. I feel like I learned that years ago, okay. Change of conduct, getting it, that aha, okay, acquiring knowledge and developing skills, ability to remember the information at the right time, ability to critically think about the topic. Thank you for everybody who's engaging and participating. What I'm asking you to do is actually get involved with your own learning. And when I'm asking you questions and having you type in, that is critical to you to learning the information, retaining it, remembering it, and being able to apply it. This piece is so critical. So we have more than 20 years now of research in neuroscience, biology, cognitive psychology, and how the human brain learns. We know more about the human brain today, but we still got a long ways to go with what we know about the brain. Here's just some of the neuroscientists that I take information from. Some of my favorites on here are Dr. Daniel Willingham, who's a cognitive psychologist who really studies learning from that field. Dr. Judy Willis is another. Dr. James Zoll. There's several on here that I've already referred to. But these are all neuroscientists, and we're getting into the various neuroscience fields. I have neurobiologists, neurocognitive psychologists now, lots of little nuances there. Learning is a biological process. Believe it or not, learning is biology in the brain. And learning operates by physical and chemical laws. There's these set of electrical impulses and chemicals that are released during the learning process. We now know what works in learning and what doesn't. And our challenge is, our view of learning is we view our audiences from above as if we're up on a stage and as if they need our help, and we look down upon them. And so we hand them information through a lecture. And we've done the best we can because we modeled what people did for us. And we thought that's the best way to do it. So learning takes place in the brains and the biology of the audience. I've got a question over here. Would I agree that virtual trumps in person for this type of learning as it makes it easier for audience to participate simultaneously? Wow, that's a loaded question for me. I would say this. I would say that both virtual, digital, I like to call it digital and face-to-face, there are things that have to be done in both models for it to stick, and that engagement piece. Now, I'm doing digital with you and trying to get you engaged by chatting, and also where you can ask questions, and that's critical. Without that piece there, without that text chat going on, number one, I would not know if you're getting it, or where you might have questions, or where you might have concerns. It's just delivery of information. Delivery of information does not change anybody. We all know that. You all know that the delivery of information doesn't change your mind. It's not until you give it attention and you start thinking about it, do you begin to actually think, should I do something with it? So that's the critical piece that needs to happen, whether it's face-to-face or digital. The research is still out. There is some research findings on both face-to-face and with digital, which one's better, because there's so many other nuances that go on that must happen. But I will say this, without the engagement piece, it's virtually worthless. Learning is physical change in the brain. When you learn something, your brain actually changes. And here's the nice thing. You can learn no matter what your age is. And the more you practice learning, the more you practice the skills, the more you practice strategic attention, focusing on a little, the most important content, not the massive amounts, but go deep with it, the healthier your brain is going to be. The more you repeat the same thing over and over again, the more you keep doing rote versus transformational thinking, rote thinking, the more toxicity you build up in your brain. That's from Dr. Sandra Von Chapman in her research field. You can't pour information into people's brains. This is what we thought the lecture is, that we could pour information into their head through the spoken word. It just doesn't happen. Your brains are not recording devices that remember everything that happens. It's not true unless you have one of those rare traits, and there's just very few people who can remember everything. The only thing you can do as a presenter is create conditions that may lead to change in the audience's brain. Think about this. The only thing you can do as a presenter is create conditions that may lead to change in the audience's brain. The audience has to do the learning, not you. You can't learn for them. And it's not to how much information you cover, regardless of what credentialing may require. It comes down to them and their engagement and their willingness and their receptivity and their openness to it. So we have to create these environments that are open and invite them in and actually kind of whet their appetite for curiosity, where they become curious about the information that we're sharing and want to learn it. So learning requires receiving information from the five senses. So you receive the information from the five senses. When you're listening to a lecture, you're listening. You're just receiving the information. Learning has not happened yet. It enters your short-term memory, 3 to 7 things for about 30 seconds. So it's just into short-term memory, and must be repeated to enter working memory. We want it to go to working memory, which is where we think about it. Otherwise, we're dropping it. Think about this. All of you, wherever you are right now, have lots of things happening around you. You can see things happening around you. You can hear other things happening around you. And until I brought this to your attention, you weren't focused on those other things, I hope. Some of you may have been, but there's other things competing for your attention. So we have to help people move into this curious space where they strategically focus on what we're talking about and they start thinking about it, which means we have to give them some breaks. So I got another question here. When organizing a conference, is it better to arrange numerous short talks, 5 to 7 minutes, or fewer long talks, 20 to 30 minutes each? Balance between covering enough topics versus boring the audience. That's a great question, and I will say this. It is good to have a mix of both. These 5 to 7 minute talks are more like entertainment. There's not a whole lot people are going to remember in 5 to 7 minutes. 20 to 30 minutes is still short. The research is showing right now that TED has messed us up because we all love TED Talks, and we're amazed that these people are so articulate in these 18-minute talks. Well, they're taught a very specific formula of how to deliver information, but the founders of TED went on 60 Minutes in 2015. You can Google it and find it online. And they came out and said, we did not do what TED intended to do, which was change the world. All we did was create great 18-minute entertaining videos that people like to watch. No thinking, no learning. And we have to enter into working memory. So the research right now is showing that deeper dives, longer sessions, and these are not 20 to 30 minutes, these are longer sessions, are the best. And I mean 2-hour, 3-hour. And I don't mean straight talk for 2 hours or 3 hours. It's 10 minutes of content, 2 to 10 minutes of an activity. 10 minutes of content, 2 to 10 minutes of an activity. So you see the difference here. Once it's entered in working memory, then it must make meaning of the information. This is where the learning begins to start. We have to make sense of it. Some of you are making sense of this already, what we're talking about. You're beginning to, well, how does this work? And you're asking questions about it because you're doing this sense-making piece. It's critical. You receive the information, then you do the sense-making piece. Then you have to connect it to your own experiences and your own knowledge. And this is where some of us will say, oh, I don't believe that, and we'll stop learning about it because we disagree with it so highly, because our experience tells us differently. And I would say from the science world, it's called confirmation bias. Your experience is not based on the scientific method, unless you've done the scientific method there. We have to be very careful if my experience says I learned best like this, or my experience says this. We have to be careful. We have to analyze that experience and say, was our experience valid through the scientific method? After following these 5 steps, it enters a long-term memory and becomes something actually we can recall. And as was said earlier, retrieving that information is just as critical because you can learn it and not be able to retrieve it later. So learning requires experience, reflection, making meaning of it, context, how does this fit in my world, developing abstraction, what am I going to do with this, and testing the abstraction. And here's the thing, the brain doesn't know real from fake. You can take your learners there mentally in a simulation. You can have them mentally visualizing how to do some financials, some problem that's coming up, have them visualizing, sitting down and actually using Excel or doing some formulas. And they're testing that abstraction that you've just taught them through mental engagement. And that's something you can always do. Learning requires thinking. Can you focus your attention on thinking and listening at the same time? Well, I've already told you the answer to this rhetorical question. No, it goes against your biology. You're either listening or you're thinking. Listening or you're thinking. So as a presenter, what this means is sometimes we have to stop talking and we have to let them think. And the best thing to do is throw a question their way and let them think about it. Reflect quietly or answer and write something down. Note-taking is critical to presentations. Note-taking is so critical because that's where they're processing the information. What does the biology of learning mean to your presentation? So here's the question for you. I'd like to see some responses. What do you think? What does this whole thing about the biology of learning mean to your presentation? What does it mean to your presentation? What does it mean to your presentation? Here we're doing the abstraction piece. We're having you test an abstraction, abstract the meaning, and test it. More questions and pauses. Harold, thank you. Change it to cater to the learner's biology. Evan, love that. How are you going to do that, Evan? Can you give us some more? Tell us a little bit more about that. Flesh that out for us. Change it to cater to the learner's biology. Nice. And here's the thing. Sometimes you have to tell the audience why you're doing what you're doing. Some will disagree with you. Just get used to that. There are always people who disagree with me. I'm used to it. More use of audience response system. Okay. Dumping information on the audience is not useful. No, it's not. Thanks, Raymond. Challenge the learner's thinking. Yes, Evan. Got to stop and let the learner start to reflect. So just as critical as developing your content is developing those critical questions that will help them and engage them and get them thinking. If we were face-to-face and we were sitting in a room of theater style, I would have you here's what I would do. I would throw a question up like this, and I would say, write something down. And I'd give you 30 to 60 seconds to write it down. I would let the room go quiet. And then I would stop and say, okay, turn to your neighbor on your right or your left, in front of you or behind you, and share with them what you wrote down. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. That piece is so critical because they're processing the information, and when you hear yourself talk out loud, it is critical because you'll self-correct. So teachable moments and learnable modes. Didactic concepts of teaching and learning, and not the older empty vessel learner model. Thanks, Vincent. Like that. It means more teaching followed by activities to put the learning to use. Great. Pause and asking questions more. Thank you so much for participating. The evidence points to one singular conclusion. The one who does the work does the learning. The one who does the work does the learning. Learning is work. This is why we don't like to do it. The biology of your brain is to avoid work. It is to avoid using up the body's resources just in case the electricity goes out in your home and you're stuck in your basement. That's a reference to Dr. Aaron. You'll have to ask her later what that's about. The body wants to hold all its resources just in case it perceives a threat coming its way, and so it can go into fight, flight, freeze and have an emotional hijack where it does something else and uses expended those resources. So it doesn't want to learn. However, if you can help the body, if you can help the brain, and you can help the amygdala understand the benefit of learning something, if they can understand the why before the what, the body will let go, the brain will let go, the amygdala will let go of those resources and say, I need to know this, I need to engage this. So are 7 to 12 minute talks hopeless because there's no time for a 3-minute pause? I would say no. I would say 7 to 12 minute talks. If you're doing a 7 to 12 minute talk, I'd say here's what I would suggest. You start out, introduce yourself, go right into it, and then give them a big piece of information. Give them something critical, a big principle. Stop and say, now what do you think? What are you going to do with that? What do you think that means? What does this research fact mean to your practice? Give them 60 seconds to write something down. Then give them another piece of the research. Give them another 60 seconds. And then have them wrap it up with, now what are you going to do with this? Now that you've got these 2 points, number 1, do you agree with it? Number 2, what are you going to do with it? That's what I would do with a 7 to 12 minute talk. So that just to make it focused on the learner. Don't give up on them. Just think about that. Or give half of your content up front and then spend the other half on how are they going to apply it. There's a couple different ways. So learning is not a conduit. Learning is not a pipeline that you can just pour into the brain for the delivery of information. And experts have an idea, they share it with the audience, and the audience has it. Now think about that. Delivery of information. If it were that easy, we would all be extremely brilliant because of all of the sessions that we have sat through both in college, both at conferences, in high school, all those people who have talked to us, if that's all learning was. Implicit in the process is that learning is passive. If knowledge can be handed to us, then all we have to do is receive it. Now think about that. If all we have to do is receive it from the speaker, and here's what we even do as presenters. Well, I gave them the information. It's not my fault if they didn't learn it. Ouch. I've been there. I've said that. Learning is more like construction. We have to actively construct our own meaning of it. We have to make sense of it, and we have to connect it. We have to understand it within context. The information has to be worked with, questioned, tested, practiced, and applied. It's kind of like building Legos. So your education, your presentation should be like the raw materials of information that are transformed and tested as the audience builds their own understanding. This is the challenge you have. So any questions, keep them coming in. I've been trying to address them as we've been going along, but keep those questions coming in. So what is engagement? Here's my next question to you. Type in what you think engagement is. And it's fine if you have some interesting answers about that. What is engagement? Type in your response about what is engagement. We've got about 20 minutes to go here, less than 20 minutes. Engagement. Evan says it's this, okay? What is engagement? What do you think engagement means? Attention? Skin in the game, I like that. Participation, active listening, thank you. Audience participation, involving others in ideas, conversation, two-way street, actively participating in the learning, thinking about how the information can apply to your own life. Oh, Jennifer, nice. Actively participating in whatever activity, okay, allowing learners to process the information. Absolutely. So there's a couple more coming in. I'm going to give you some more seconds to think about that. Okay, so allowing learners to process the information is kind of where we landed. Here's what engagement is. Most of us want audience engagement during our presentations. I would say most of you want this, but we don't always know how to achieve it. We're not real sure how to get it. Rarely do we as presenters just want audiences have passive listening. Now, the old thought process is if the audience was quiet and they were facing the front and their eyes were on us, they were engaged. Now just think about yourself. How many times have you sat in a session at a conference with your eyes on the front, watching these presenters come through one by one? You've got a smile on your face, you nod your head, and all the while you're thinking about how long is this going to go on? Well, what am I going to have for lunch? Did I turn off the iron when I left the room? Well, who's picking up the kids from soccer practice? Your brain is somewhere else. Their bodies are physically present, but they are mentally gone. And what we want is we love to be able to control our audiences, unless we think we control our audiences. We thought that talking at our audience was a way to control the audience. Nah, it was a way to control the information flow, not control the audience. Engagement is the frequency with which learners participate in activities that involve active interaction and mental thought. When we're thinking about the learning process, this is what engagement is. The frequency in which they participate in activities that involve interaction and mental thought. So think about that. It is the frequency, and how often do you have that happen? Engaged audiences take time to make meaning of information shared during the presentation. They take the time to make meaning of the information shared during the presentation. Now, I'm going to tell you something. You're going to have people who are going to write on your evaluations, they're going to come up to you, but you didn't tell me how to do X. And the answer to that is, yes, that's correct. I wanted you to do X. I wanted you to figure it out. I was giving you the principles. I was giving you the tools to do it. They're following the biology of the brain. They just want you to tell them the formula. Just tell them the tips. Tell them the tricks. Tell them the hints. Tell them how to do it. They're following the biology of the brain. That person will never learn that until they shift out of that, I just got to copy, got to get this. They're using a capitalistic thought process of learning that they can consume as much information as they can, and they learn from that. And that's not it at all. So just be prepared. You will have people who say that. Engaged audiences must be involved in active learning, not passive listening. So your question to yourself is, do you want them to hear it, or do you want them to learn it? If you want them to hear it, keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you've always done. If you want them to learn it, you have to shift some things. Talking head, passive listening. I've done many a focus group where I ask people, why do you come to the conference? I've had groups say to me, I come to sleep. I come to sleep during the sessions because that's when I can catch up and I can get my credits at the same time. Ouch. Telling is not education. So there's a bunch of fast facts in here about the lecture. I'm going to skip all of these. And I actually going to jump ahead here. Give me just a second. And jump ahead here. And let's see if I can do this. Nope, went the wrong way. I'm going to jump very fast through some of these slides here. I went to a blank slide. Interesting. Here we go. So where in the world do you start? Let me back up here. Where do you start? This is the question that you really have. Where do you start? How do you do this? How do you get the audience involved? You want to identify how to set a positive, safe environment. You want to start by identifying how to set a safe and positive environment. This is critical. You want to set some expectations. You want to give the audience control, which is what I did for you with presenter attendee agreement, and want to declare it a safe space. And you want to give them the freedom to leave if it's not working for them. So you want to set up that space, and setting up the tone, the space, is so critical to your presentation so they feel safe that they can learn, because if not, the amygdala will take over and they will not learn at all. And one of the worst things to say to me during a presentation is, we're going to do role playing. I'm going to call on some of you unknown, and I'm just going to call you up here and put you on the stage, and you're going to be asked to do something. My amygdala goes berserk. Now, I've learned how to calm my amygdala down so it doesn't go berserk, but it used to be, you did that to me, I can't hear anything else you're saying, I can't learn. And all of you have triggers. Some of you don't like the word interactivity. You automatically go to, oh my gosh, they're going to call me out in the audience, and I'm going to put up, on stage in front of people. What do I do if I say the wrong thing? So we have to create a safe space, and you want people to talk in pairs. Pairs are safe. Talking in front of the whole audience is not safe for everyone. Then you want to create 3 learner outcomes. You want to ask yourself, what 3 things do you want the audience to remember? If you've got 15 minutes, ask yourself, what 1 thing do you want the audience to remember at the end of that 15 minutes? What 1 thing? 1 thing, not 3, but 1 if you've got 15 minutes. Longer than 15 minutes, 3. What 3 things do you want the audience to remember? Build your presentation around those 3 things. So then list the why or the with them, what's in it for me. After you build those 3 things, you're going to build the presentation around, you want to go immediately to the why. Why would this thing in a short presentation, 15 minutes, be important to them? Or why would these things be important to them? What's in this for them? What's the benefit for them? You want to go to that next. And then you start developing your presentation. And every slide that you have, you ask yourself this: is this content necessary for the audience to know, or they fail at the job? Is this content necessary for them to know, or they fail? And if the answer is no, it's not necessary, pull it out. Don't use it. You want to chunk your content into 10-minute segments. If you've only got 15 minutes, think about 10 minutes of content, and then take that other 5 and do maybe 1 or 2 minutes up at the front and the rest of it at the end for the audience to do something. You want to chunk it into 10-minute segments. Then you want to chain it. Then you want to give them time to chain it to their experience, their knowledge. So you want to chunk and chain. Chunk and chain is what we would say today. You want to layer the content with stories and facts. You want to make it relevant to them. This is where stories and emotions and facts apply in these situations. And from there, you want to identify 3 to 6 places. If you have an hour presentation, you want to identify 3 to 6 places for the audience participation. Focus on learning design for 2 to 3 activities. Ask provocative questions to spur thinking and discussion. If you have a 45 or 60-minute presentation, 75, 90-minute presentation, think of, can I give up 2 minutes, 3 places, a total of 6 minutes for my audience to process the information? Sure you can. Sure you can give up 6 minutes throughout a 60-minute presentation or 45-minute presentation to allow them to chunk and chain, to process and reflect. Sure you can. So take questions throughout your presentation. You notice I've been taking the questions as they come up, because that's another thing about the brain. When it has a question, it has a question, and it wants to know the answer. And what I will often do when I'm face-to-face is, if a question comes up, somebody raises their hand, and I'm not sure if that question is a rabbit trail or not, I will ask the audience, how many other people in the audience have the same question? If the number is short, I will say to that person, when we do our next activity, I'll come back to where you're sitting and I'll answer your question for you if that's okay, since not many people have the same question. However, if a lot of people raise their hands, I'm going to go after that question and tell everybody in the audience. So combining lecture with audience interaction. Let's take this tactics. This is what somebody wanted to know, the tactics. Here we go. Pair share. The most easy thing to do in any type of room situation is pair share. What you want to have them do is think, write, share. Think, write, share. You want to give them a question, think about it, write something down, share it with your neighbor. It's a version of pair share. Think about it, write it down, share it with your neighbor. And that process is critical for all the introverts in the room because they need to think first. And we should be thinking before we just start responding. When we write it down, we're actually processing the information. We're processing our thoughts. Then we share it. We're listening to what we're saying, and we're giving a second run through after we've written it down. Pair share is easy. Turn your neighbor on your right or your left, or in front of you or behind you, or find somebody. And in twos or threes, not as a table of 6, not as a table of 8, not as a table of 12, but in twos and threes, share what your thoughts are. Share your responses. Mental aerobics. Mental aerobics is giving them a handout, or you actually have a handout in your PowerPoint that's put up online ahead of time that you ask them to go to, and there may be some important points written on those handouts, but there's words missing, or there's a paragraph missing, or there's a space for them to define a paragraph that you've talked about. That's what mental aerobics is. It's actually exercising the mind. It's so easy to do. Take your content, put it into a one-pager or a half-pager, and then leave some blanks in it, leave some areas for them to explain what something means, and engage the mind that way. Structured note-taking is actually what I was talking about. Mental aerobics is actually a version of one of the terms. If you look up mental aerobics, you'll see a format actually for mental aerobics. Structured note-taking is another version I just said. There's some new research out that shows note-taking is critical. And structured note-taking, giving them things where they have to write in words or define things on their own, is better than no note-taking at all. Buzz groups. If your room is set classroom style, what I mean by that is it's set in long tables, what you do is you have people who are sitting on the tables in front turn their chairs around and talk to the table behind them. So they just turn around and talk to the people that are immediately behind them, and you've got this buzz group thing going on. And then what you can actually do is you can actually have one table that's at the front of the room, get up and go to the tables on the right side of the room, talk to those, and have people moving around. The research shows the more we can get people moving physically with their bodies during learning, the better off we are. That's why centers work so well for kindergartners, because they were constantly moving from center to center every 10 minutes. Silent reflection. This one's easy. You throw up a question online on the PowerPoint. You throw up a question. You read it to them. And you say, we're going to go quiet for 60 seconds. Think about it. Write down your responses. You don't have to debrief it. Don't think you do. And anybody in the room who wants everybody's answers, they're using a consumer capitalistic mindset of, I've got to get everybody's answers. No, you don't. Structured attention, strategic attention, structured focus, focus it down. Silent reflection is critical. Thank you. Pair share is so easy to do. Sharing with the neighbors is such an easy thing to do. See, there's no magic bullets here. It's just really common sense and smart things. So let me just give you some other benefits here. Overcoming resistance, because we know the brain is going to resist this. Now, I love learning. I study the brain and learning, and I'm constantly reading about it. I'm constantly going to classes because I want to continue to perfect this. But even I go to sessions, and I'm like, I don't want to learn today, and I know better. So I'm gauging my body going, okay, do I need to check out of this session? Should I not be here? Am I overdoing it? Or what's causing me not want to learn? Frequent and explicit communication. It's a rationale behind evidence-based education. You have evidence-based medicine, evidence-based dentistry. We have evidence-based education. You want to give them frequent and explicit communication. And anytime you ask them a question and you say, it's up to you to define the parameters, and you have those people who say to you, well, how many do I have to answer? Or what exactly do you mean by that? Do you want 2 responses or 3 responses or 3 characteristics? Those people are looking for the right answer to appease the teacher. They're not used to thinking on their own. They're used to thinking for a grade or to get an approval from somebody else. And they're the ones that will struggle with, you decide the parameters. And you want them to wrestle with it. Remember, there's got to be a challenge. Provide encouragement and positive reinforcement. Reduce the anxiety. Learning includes failure. And when you're at a conference, you're not going to hurt anybody. When you're just thinking it through and learning with that failure, if you make a mistake, you can self-correct. It's easy to do. It's much better to do in simulation than in real life. But it's okay to do it in real life too, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. Solicit feedback from the audience and overcoming resistance. And solicit feedback from speakers as well. Display empathy and communication and resist the resistance. Don't give in to it. Resist it. When they say to you, well, I don't want to do this. I know it's tough. Remember, I gave you that free pass card. Use your free pass card and have them do it. What I've seen audiences who are resisting this, and I tell them, use your free pass, and they do, they eventually get sucked in because there's something curious that's there. So be mindful of the politics. Oh, in this day and age, don't try to convert everyone. Allow some to do old school methods. It's okay to have some lecturing. I'm not saying avoid it completely. We have to have some of it because we have to give the information out there. So you want to do a mix and blend of the both. Find like-minded colleagues to discuss success and challenges. And that's kind of what AAO is doing here. You know, with Dr. Erin involved here, she's a lifelong learner. She loves learning. So these are just some things that I would say to you. Take some simple steps. Make it easy for yourself. Can you find 1 or 2 or 3 places in your presentation at AAO to really focus on the learner and allow them to engage with the content, engage with the mind, and engage with each other? So then we talked about pedagogy, andragogy, expert-centered, participant-centered. We defined engagement, why it's necessary for learning to occur, and we identified some steps to transition your traditional lecture to an interactive peer-to-peer presentation. So I'm going to stop there. I have about 3 minutes. If you have some questions, Dr. Erin, anything you'd like to say, and wrapping it up as well?
So Jeff, just a quick question. You commented on the fact that having groups of 6 and 7 people is not ideal. Can you comment on why that's not as good of a teaching?
Yeah, it's fine if they're sitting in tables of 6 or 7, but the reason you don't want to do that is because one person talks and 5 people listen if there's 6, and you're right back to a talking head with 5. Yeah. So it's better if the smaller the groups, the safer we feel. The research actually shows the best seating formats for learning is the coffee table. The small table you would have at a coffee house where 2 or 3 people are sitting. That's where the best social learning is occurring because we feel the safest there and everybody gets a chance to talk. That's what you want to focus on, giving everybody a chance to talk.
Great. And it looks like there's a question, how does the time of day affect learner uptake? Are mid-afternoon talks associated with more loss of...
Yes, Vincent, they are. So if you're scheduled in the mid-afternoon or towards the end of the day, you have some other barriers that you have to get over. And so you have to think about that as a presenter and what are you going to do? And you have to trust, here's the other thing, folks, trust the biology of learning. If you trust the biology of learning, and if it is right after lunch, you know you're going to need to get them up and moving around. And you want to give them more times to talk with one another and less times for you to talk because they'll just fall asleep. It's just the way the brain works. I see another question there too. Varying level of expertise in the audience. You know, that's a great question. How do you avoid scrap teaching? We call it scrap learning and scrap teaching when there are varying levels of expertise in the audience. You know, one of the things I will often do is I will have people at the beginning of a presentation judge themselves on where they see themselves as beginners, novice, or experts. And I'll see who in the room sees themselves as experts. And then I'll have the experts actually go to the novices. And I'll have the novices or the beginners ask the expert questions. I will use my audience. I will use that expertise. And I will let them say how they have used a certain fact or a certain research or a certain procedure, a certain tip or task. I'll let them share with the others so that they have this natural one-on-one. And let's see, we got a minute and a half. Differences in how people learn. I prefer reading, writing things down, whereas someone else may learn better through listening. So, Krista, and I'm going to ask for grace before I say this. Because if you're like me, this was a bomb that blew off in my brain many years ago. There are no such thing as learning differences. The research shows because of the biology of learning, we all learn the same. Now, some of us may say we prefer listening, and that is actually confirmation bias. So there's a real challenge here because we all learn from the same way the biology of learning. We're more like than we are different is what the research has shown, and believe it or not, we are all visual learners, the research says. Even those who are visually impaired learn best through visuals because visuals are the currency of the brain. So what I often will do, and Krista, since I don't know you well, and you can throw things at me later, or I hope that more than anything this will just cause you to go and look and do some research on your own and find out what some studies out there have said about learning differences, learning styles, and those various things like that. And I just let people in a session, I let them, whatever they think, and I don't try to attack it so much. But as a presenter, it's important for you to know this. So I hope that answered the question. Maria, do you have anything to add? We got about 9 seconds. Yes.
No, I think that's great. Thank you so much. I think we all need to just remember, think, write, and share. This was a great presentation, Jeff, and thank you to all the participants who were very actively engaged through the entire 1-hour session. So enjoy your evening. Good night.